The young man was accompanied by his parents and an attorney. And he sat down at the table across from me, and he was making these little nervous grunts. And I had a stack of papers on the table in front of me, and it had everything that this young man had written and said about me for the past few years. But I didn't need to look, because they were sort of burned into my brain. So I thrust out my hand, and I said, Hi, I'm Brittan Heller. I see here that you want to gouge out my eyes and skull fuck my corpse. But don't you think we should be introduced first? My name is Brittan Heller, and I was the Jane Doe in one of the first cyber harassment lawsuits about a decade ago. Since then, I've been working on issues related to online civility and how online conduct impacts offline behavior. As Jesse said, I founded the Center for Technology and Society, the only civil rights organization with a flagship in Silicon Valley designed to create justice and fair treatment for all in digital environments. I now work for the Carr Center for Human Rights at Harvard University, where I look at the human rights impacts of emergent media. Today I'm going to tell you what it felt like to be patient zero in the first online harassment case, with the hope that it will inform your thinking about your users and your experiences. I'll then share the top 4 insights that I believe will help you build more inclusive and representational experiences going forward. Through this, I hope we can all help create the type of virtual environments that we all want to see. Online harassment is a serious problem, but we have an opportunity with VR like we haven't before. We can do very much to prevent it from getting online harassment from taking a foothold in VR's new platforms, products, and services. So everybody always asks how the harassment case started. I was a student at Stanford University studying to get into law school. And there was a young man in my study group who kept asking me out on dates. And I declined him, and then to add insult to injury, I got into his dream school and he didn't. So the next day, posts started appearing on this web forum. And it was supposed to be about law school admissions, but it really wasn't. It was a forum where people were attacked for their race, their gender, their ethnicity, their sexual identity, all the things that make people different. The forum said, "Stupid bitch to attend Yale Law." And I remember reading the posts and thinking, oh, this is kind of silly. You know, it says that I pretend to be a minority. It says that I'm a terrorist, that I bribe my way into school with sexual favors or with money. I want to meet that version of Brittan Heller, because she's much cooler than me. That I got an extraordinarily low score on the test, and that I was functionally illiterate. And so I tried to forget about it, because it just seemed really dumb. And then in law school, you start applying for jobs at law firms during the summer. And when I was doing that, I got a strange reaction from the law firms. They said, "You're great, you're the top of your class, you're the editor of the International Law Journal, we would love to hire you, but you gotta clean up your Google search. Because these things are all ridiculous, as you say, but we really don't want our firm's name associated with content like that." At the same time, so I went to the website and I said, "Hey, can you do me a favor and take this down, because it's actually affecting my real life in ways that you probably didn't anticipate." They said no. At the same time, they started a Girls of the Top 14 Law Schools contest. And what they would do is they would encourage people to send in pictures of their classmates, and then they would manipulate the media. They would put the entreaties of the women underneath, so saying things like, "Why are you doing this to me? That's not me in those pictures. My family will see this, my church will see this, my job will see this. Why are you trying to ruin my life? Who are you? I don't know you." And they thought it was funny, so they'd put all of the entreaties underneath. Since they were mad at me, I didn't end up in pornography pictures, but I ended up in crime scene photos. So I went back to the website and said, okay, you really need to knock it off. But here's a compromise. Here's one line of code. This one line of code will allow you to say and do whatever you want, and it will de-index it from Google so that you aren't harming people through your activities. Just one line of code. What do you say? And they said, you're going to have to sue us. And I thought, okay. So, because I actually had, I don't know if there's lawyers in the room, and I'm sorry if there are, but I had standing where most people who are harassed online don't. So I got pro bono counsel from Stanford and Yale Law School. The future chief security officer of Facebook was my volunteer cybersecurity researcher. I had a reputation management firm and PR firm volunteer to help me. And I announced the suit on the front page of the Washington Post. Game on. It got a lot worse before it got better. I had to have the FBI escort me to finals at one point. I would go online and the things would follow me. So I would get emails and texts and messages threatening me wherever I went. Some of the people who were participating in the forum were my classmates. So there would be a running commentary about what I was wearing and what I said in class every day. It meant that I stopped running to go outside because they were entreating people to take pictures of me so that they would own the copyright and they could do whatever they wanted to the images. It got a lot worse after that, too. There was one law firm that took a chance on me, and so I remember sitting at my desk and getting an email, and I opened it, and it was what I like to call a poison pen letter. It was addressed to every managing partner of the law firm that I had worked for, every hiring partner, everyone they could find online who seemed like they were important and could make a decision about my future. And then every professor that they could find at Yale Law School. And it was an indictment of my crimes against men, repeating all of the allegations that they had made that showed that it was all my fault that this was happening, and threatening me, saying that they had a very important job and were a very important person, and if I were to expose them, then they were going to make me pay. I ended up having to take time off of law school because the threats and the harassment got so severe in the school, either couldn't or, in my opinion, wouldn't do anything. Eventually, I decided that this case had the possibility to create bad law. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act is what governs content online, and so we thought that the people running the website were actually encouraging the content and posting some of the content, and that would make them liable. But there's a difference between what you know and what you can prove. I didn't want to bring it to people thought the case was going to go to the Supreme Court because they let us do things that nobody had ever done before, like serve process on this web forum to people under their screen names. So looking at all the court filings was really funny because it was like Jane Doe versus Hitler, 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 and cheese-eating surrender monkey, and things like that. So many new issues that people thought it had to go to the Supreme Court. The people at Harvard called me the girl who wanted to kill the internet, which I didn't mention during my job interview, but I was kind of tickled that they hired me after. So public opinion eventually changed, but I decided to settle with the company and to help them create solutions to this sort of thing. So I went to them and proposed that we divide it into off-topic and on-topic related behavior. On-topic would be about law school admissions, which is what the website was about. Off-topic can be whatever they wanted, not safe for work-related content, but de-indexed from Google. They had lost their Google ads, so they didn't have the incentive to create such salacious content anymore. And then asked them to take all of the content down about me and the other Jane Does. So it was a win-win. But it taught me that looking at new forms of media, this was a new form at that time, that there are things that you can do when you're designing these products and these systems so that you're not going to, hopefully, you're not going to have a speaker up here in 10 years talking about how VR did the same sort of thing to them. So there's a couple concrete things that I think people in the industry can do when they're designing products and experiences to make harassment less likely. According to Pew Research, 40% of Americans report having been the target of online harassment. 2/3 report seeing someone else being targeted. 94% of US adults have some familiarity with online harassment, and 4 out of 5 people believe companies should take more responsibility for these issues. So my story shows that it wasn't always this way, but that's where we are now. So in light of incidents like this, that are more and more common on social media, I've become fixated on the question, what can VR content creators and developers do to prevent harassment from taking hold in their medium? Number 1, focus on behaviors and not on speakers. Here's the bottom line. You are not going to deter all misbehavior and harassment on your platform. There will be people who come to your experiences to try to push the limits and misuse and abuse the things that you put your heart and soul into creating. If you go out with the goal to reduce or remove all harassment from your platform, you're going to fail. So instead, what I'd encourage you to do is to identify ways that people exploit the design and the functionality of your experiences and use that to create productive friction. I look to traditional online gaming for some of the best examples of this. Microsoft has the best interface when it comes to screen names. So if you go on Xbox Live and you create a name that violates the rules, like Hitler, 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 you'll get dinged. However, they don't want, the moderators and the company, they don't want people to leave the platform after they've made such a big capital investment in the hardware. They also have really invested in the games, and if you just kick them off, both parties lose. So instead, what they do is they will change your name to a random moniker. So not Hitler, 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 but Fluffy Bunny 23, or something nonsensical that really doesn't embody the gravitas that most online gamers want when they're going into Xbox Live. And then they'll charge you a carefully calibrated fee to change it. And they've figured this out by working years and years. So it's the magic number that will make people think twice about doing this again, but won't dissuade them from actually paying it and coming back. Here, Microsoft identified a harassing behavior, violating screen names, and they paired that with productive friction, a forced name change. It doesn't make misbehavior impossible, but it makes it a lot harder and more annoying for people who violate the policy. So small changes like this can have huge impacts across behavior in online spaces. 2, most offenders aren't serial harassers. When I was running the Center for Technology and Society, we helped conduct the first big data study of potential civil rights abuses in social media. We found that in the 9 months preceding the 2016 election, there were 2.6 million anti-Semitic tweets that were circulating around Twitter related to this, and they had 10 billion impressions. 1,600 users created all of that content. And it was a sliver of Twitter's 313 million users at that time, but it had the same impact as if those users had bought a $20 million Super Bowl ad. In other words, a tiny slice of harassing users has a massive outsized impact on your platform. Other studies have found the same thing. If you look at harassment on Twitter, 80% of the people who are violating the rules are doing it for the first time. People get emotional, and they don't often communicate their frustration in effective ways. So these are the users that can be guided away from harassing again. they're the source of, and they're actually not the source of most of the violations. That's the 20% of dyed-in-the-wool trolls. The best way to stop misbehavior is to first inform people of the rules. Twitter actually last week just changed its policies, so they've simplified the rules and they've made them bigger and easier for users to access. I anticipate this is going to make the violations of the rules go way, way down on their platform because that's what the research says. Quite simply, it's easy to break rules if you're not aware what's expected of you. Right now, before Twitter's changed, I guess, the only people I know who read Twitter's rules are advocates like me or people who intend to break them. So creating clear terms of service and getting most users to read or listen to them is a first big step. Second is to use positive peer pressure to inform people about social norms, and this is more effective than you'd think. Consider this study about about towel usage in hotel rooms. So signs like reuse your towel to save the environment actually had little impact on people's behavior. However, when that same sign was changed to frame the behavior as a social norm, 3 out of 5 people chose to reuse their towel. The adherence spiked by half. When it was hyper-personalized, 3 out of 5 people in this room chose to reuse their towel. They had 85% adherence. Personalizing recommended behavior in terms of group norms has proven to be the most effective. I've seen this work in the harassment context as well. Hate-Based API is a plugin on social media that educators can use on internet chats for their students. It relies on a database of international hate speech-related terms. Consider cockroach. For example, if someone sent a message calling someone a cockroach, they wouldn't let that person send the message immediately. They would say, hello, do you know that this term was used in the Rwandan genocide to justify the killing of 800,000 people in April 1994? Do you still wish to proceed? 80% of people will say, oh, no. So it actually replicates the earlier studies. Making users aware that their actions are choices and not just reactions to stimuli can have a positive impact on reducing harassment. Part of the reason for this is that in online spaces, there's still reputational economies. Even Fluffy Bunny 23 is known, has credibility within the online gaming space, and has behaviors attached to his or her name. Because of this, anonymity is not the actual problem in harassment. It's the social norms created by the users of the platform. 3, engage helpers. The majority of people have seen someone targeted online, but they don't really know what to do. When confronted with this situation, players report that it might seem silly, but if you focus, users report that they don't know what to do and they want to help. So as designers, you can make that as easy as possible for your users. Creating ways for bystanders to intervene or report back when the systems are failing or being exploited is critical. There's an example about a VR experience with a pub, and you can buy drinks for people in the pub. A group of users decided that they were going to own the pub, and whenever any new users came in, they bought so many drinks that it filled up the pool games and the place where you stand to play darts so nobody could play the game. It's a silly example, but if you have to make it easy for people to report unanticipated ways that the system is being misused and abused. Finally, when things go wrong, I encourage you to, number 4, humanize. Use humans and not machines, at least for part of your user engagement. Think about having an ombudsman person for the most serious cases. When people come to me when they've been harassed, the thing that they report most is that they feel doubly victimized by not being able to talk to any person when really bad things are happening. The more users are reminded of the humanity of their fellow participants, the less often you're going to see incidents of harassment on your platform. One example of this is eyes. Research shows that if you have avatars that show people's eyes, even if it's like in Where Thoughts Go, where it's blinky Mickey Mouse eyes on an orb, incidences of harassment are far reduced. And people model good behaviors because they feel like they're being watched by part of a social group. Think about gaming. How many times have you heard have you heard of the villain in a game having huge eyes, then you make eye contact and connect? That normally doesn't happen. So, in conclusion, to circle back to the beginning, the young man I met with told me something that I heard from all of the harassers we identified that I got to talk to. They all had different ages and professions and levels of education. They were from places I'd never been for the most part. And they all said the same thing. They said, I didn't realize that what I was doing hurt a real person. I didn't realize there was someone on the other side of the screen that my actions were impacting. And I'm so, so sorry. We may not be able to have an impact on all incidents, but we can avoid the pitfalls we've seen in other online environments if we listen to those people and learn from their mistakes. This is especially so if we, 1, focus on behaviors and not speakers, 2, remember that most offenders aren't serial harassers, 3, engage the helpers, and 4, humanize our VR. It's important for VR to take harassment challenges seriously because, as we all know, VR makes these experiences that we build seem real. They embed in our heads like memories. Because of this, I argue that we have a higher duty of care towards our users. If we're thoughtful and create VR worlds and use design to help us reach this goal, we can create the kind of inclusive virtual worlds that we all want to see. Thank you very much. You can message me on Twitter or find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to talk more. Thank you.